Abrí el alma para el programa que te transporta donde están tus ídolos. Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show. Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show. Con la conducción de Ariel Palacio. Las mejores entrevistas a los artistas más importantes del mundo. Los mejores tracks del dance europeo están aquí. Bienvenidos a Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show. Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Especial de colección, Palacio Buenos Aires.
¿Qué tal, amigos? Así arrancamos la edición 237 de PBA de Palacio Buenos Aires. Mi nombre es Ariel Palacio y hoy, por primera vez, desde Reino Unido, METTA GLYDE. Muchas gracias a la gente de Stelar Sound, muchas gracias también a Natalia, manager del grupo, y vamos a escuchar muy pero muy buena música. Una entrevista exclusiva, vamos a preguntarle un montón de cosas, y acuérdense que este sábado 15 van a estar tocando por primera vez en Madrid junto a muchos amigos. Las entradas se encuentran disponibles en entradium.com. Estamos en estadodetrance.com, España. También estamos en FM Trans 103.3, Buenos Aires, Tech Radio, FM 88.7, Dance FM Córdoba, Láser Mix FM 102.3, Trenquelauquen, electronaradio.com y Play Radio. Así arrancamos PBA, así arrancamos Palacio Buenos Aires.
Bienvenidos a Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Hi, this is Adam from METTA GLYDE and we are on Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Esto es Rhapsody. Bueno, amigos, ¿qué les parece si hablamos un poquito de METTA GLYDE? Son un dúo con sede en Reino Unido. Se encuentran en la ola moderna del trance. Aclamado por Sin Tallas, su estilo sensato, emotivo, pero con mucha energía, realmente captura la imaginación y se traduce perfectamente al trance. Primeros en Beatport en 3 oportunidades. Con ustedes, METTA GLYDE. Estamos escuchando la edición 237 de PBA de Palacio Buenos Aires. Con ustedes, Metta GLYDE. Esto es You Are My Orbit.
Estás escuchando lo mejor de la música electrónica. Conduce Ariel Palacio.
Draw from the outside.
Pero amigos, les cuento algunas de las preguntas que le hicimos a Metta GLYDE. Muchísimas gracias, Adam. Por supuesto que le preguntamos cómo nació el nombre del grupo, alguna historia divertida en algún show, qué es lo que más les gusta de su profesión, qué conocen de Argentina. Contanos de tu nueva producción Shadow, algunos consejos para los futuros músicos y por supuesto nos van a contar acerca de su show por primera vez en Madrid. Ladies and gentlemen, the first time at PBA Palacio Buenos Aires, Metta GLYDE.
Facebook, Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Hi, this is Adam from Metta GLYDE, and we are on Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Exclusivo.
Any funny story that happened to you in a nightclub? For myself, Adam, I don't think this really counts for a nightclub, but it's certainly something to do with music. And it comes from a time when I worked in hospitality in events. And running events for all kinds of different people and occasions, like weddings, business talks, and so on. There was a Christmas party where the DJ didn't turn up for some reason. So there was this Christmas party in this room, maybe about 50, 60 people all having dinner. And in the evening, they were meant to have the entertainment, which didn't turn up, of course. Now, I think the hotel, which is where the place was, didn't want to look bad that the DJ didn't turn up. So they came and asked me. They were aware that I was producing at the time and that I had gigs and things outside of my work there. So they said, could you stand in for the DJ? And I was thinking, well, okay, no problem. And then they showed me the room, and there was a very primitive little setup in the corner of some you couldn't really call them decks, I suppose, but very primitive music system. And they just said, well, just play tracks. And I was thinking, okay, well, I don't even know what tracks that I could play. And I quickly realized that when I was trying to look at the equipment and set it up, that there was just a whole host of tracks and music, kind of like pop music, if you like, that I had absolutely no idea about. Because myself, I only listened to obviously dance music, and then outside of that, things like post-rock, if you like, and movie soundtracks, certainly not pop music like Ed Sheeran. So I only had about an hour to get familiar. And then when the evening entertainment was starting, I went purely on instinct on just playing tracks that I kind of recognized for over the years that I knew were some kind of, popular track, things like, I don't know, Whitney Houston, Madonna, and so on. But that soon ran out for me. And in the end, I had on one hand on the computer trying to select tracks. And then on the other hand, I had my mobile phone where I was texting a friend asking them to go onto Spotify or Google or anything that they had to just continually ply me with names of tracks that people might enjoy in this setting. And it was touch and go, because every time I pressed play on a track that I was relieved that I was actually playing something, I then had to go back to my phone to then try and locate another track from this computer to just try and put something on that would work and be there. And I managed to do it for about 5 hours, I think, in the end, 4 or 5 hours. So it was really horrible and a far cry from what Lee and I are doing now. But it was a very tense situation trying to find tracks that I had absolutely no idea what they were or what they sounded like. And every time anyone came up to a request, I was relieved because it took a bit of pressure off. So I had at least another track lined up ready to go after the next one and finish. So that was stressful and not funny at the time, but certainly something I can laugh about now.
Encontranos en Apple Podcast como PBA Palacio Buenos Aires.
what do you like the most about your profession, and what are the biggest challenges of being a DJ producer? Well, the things that we like most about our profession is that we both absolutely love doing it. So it's something that we're very thankful of, particularly where we've come from. As I mentioned about my funny story, it was working in a hotel in events, very demanding job, hospitality. And Lee is just like me. We're both very humble people. We come from very humble backgrounds, very working class, and we've done a number of jobs over the years that have been there to just pay our way. And they've been very demanding, very challenging, and we recognize that every day that we are working on music is that it hasn't always been this way, and it's been very hard work getting to where we are, and it continues to be hard work, of course. So we love what we do in that when we switch on the computer in the morning, we're making products for our store, magsignaturesound.com. We're working with other producers and DJs on collaborations and remixes. We're working on our album, on originals. So we've got so many things going on, and it's really, really amazing. Completely even more amazing considering the many years that we've spent doing all manner of jobs to make ends meet. So moving on to the biggest challenges of what we do, as much as we love it, the challenges I'm sure might be harder to find compared to our previous jobs, but they are still there. I think when in our previous jobs, we would work, that kind of 9 to 5 or the 8 hours, typically the 8 hours with whatever we were doing. But in that time, there was a bit more structure. There was friends that you would have at work, people you would speak to on a daily basis, and then maybe even a social life outside of that. So there's there's things that you don't have in the studio that you do have when we were out doing our other jobs. And when you're in that studio, it can be quite lonely at times, sat in front of a screen. And without structure, where you're often just doing what you can when you can, all these things can impact your home life, your relationships, friendships. So it's quite more difficult to organize yourself and get those things right at times. And I think that being a producer, you have to continually be thinking about what you're doing, where you're going. And for Lee and I, it's certainly quite a big question that we always remain true to ourselves and what we're doing with what we love. But of course, you're always looking over your shoulder and thinking about other genres and how successful they are, and whether what we're doing is something that maybe we could go into other genres to try and get success elsewhere. But we've always maintained what we're trying to do, our sort of certain sound, and stay true to that. And that's important because we've got a very loyal fan base, and we are being successful. So we are staying with what we're doing and not looking over our shoulder at other genres and thinking about what they're doing. We're staying true to ourselves. So I think that the next thing being DJing, of course, again, a wonderful opportunity to travel, meet people, get out of the studio and play the music that people love. It's certainly a huge privilege, and it's really something that we dreamed of when we started out together. So to do that is really wonderful. It can be challenging because it can be tiring. It can be very demanding. And of course, it takes you away from home, which can sometimes be challenging if it's for quite a few days at a time. So everything to do with this profession, being a producer, being a DJ, it's like any profession. It has amazing, amazing elements to it, and then some challenges too. But we're certainly very thankful and very humble, particularly from where we've come from and where we started to where we are now.
Si sos DJ o productor musical, esta es tu oportunidad. Envíanos tu set o producción a palaciobuenosAires.rs@gmail.com y prepárate para difundir lo que amás.
Hi, this is Adam from Metta Glide, and we are on Palacio Buenos Aires radio show.
How was your Argentina debut? Well, it was amazing. It's certainly a place that we'd always wanted to go to. You hear nothing but good things from other producers, DJs that have played there. It's always about, you know, what a wonderful country, and the people, the crowd is just something special, and it's something that I've spoken to so many people about, and everyone says the same thing. So to experience it was wonderful. So absolutely, you know, wonderful weather, wonderful friendly people, and such a wild crowd, you know, really knowledgeable and really excited about the music. So it's a dream come true, and certainly a place that we would love to come back to in the future, and no doubt we will. My girlfriend is Argentinian, so she's introduced me to quite a lot of Argentinian customs, mate and Fernet. And I have made Fernet my kind of go-to drink for gigs. When anyone ever asks what kind of drink I would like when I'm in the club before playing, Fernet is the one that I choose, which might surprise a few people in Argentina that an English person would be choosing that as a drink, and certainly confuse a lot of international people wondering just what on earth that drink is. So I have no problems ordering it. I really enjoy it. So it was really lovely to get the kind of real thing, if you like, whilst being in Argentina. So a Fernet and Coke is just a great way to sort of finish it all off there. It was really amazing. So yeah, would love to come back and experience it all again. It's certainly one of the top places in the world for trance music and events. How was the song Shadow born? Well, like every track we do, it's a process that can take sometimes 1 year or 2 years. We've still got tracks that aren't finished, half finished, and I'm sure every producer would understand that. With Shadow in particular, I think it was a song that was started early 2022 and finished late 2022, so certainly almost a year. And that track started off with a completely different riff, but as usual with us, we wanted the sort of energy, we wanted the kind of impact. So we had that with the original track, but something wasn't quite right. So Lee and I, we just worked very organically, sending things backwards and forwards until it's right. So with Shadow, there wasn't a particular direction outside of what we usually try to achieve in music, but it certainly did take a lot of twists and turns along the way. And as I say, every track that we do does. It starts off one way and finishes another. Sometimes we get to 6, 7 versions of the track, all different riffs, different sounds, until we settle on the one that's right. So it's a real process. But as I said, we've still got tracks that are a year, maybe more in production, and I guess they get finished when they get finished. But yeah, Shadow's a great track, but we certainly wanted that kind of very energetic and slightly different sort of style to go through that track, and I think that hopefully we achieved it.
New release.
Esto es su última producción, Shadow. Bueno amigos, estamos en Tech Radio FM 88.7 MHz. También estamos en estadodetrance.com, España. FM Láser Mix 102.3, Trenquelauquen. electronaradio.com, FM Trans 103.3, Dance FM 95.3, Córdoba y en Play Radio. Acuérdense que nos pueden encontrar en bithey.com, DJW Magazine y muy pronto en DJ Mag Latinoamérica. Estamos en Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iVoox, iTunes, entre otras plataformas. Simplemente suscríbete y vas a disfrutar a los mejores artistas del mundo.
Any tips for people willing to become a producer in the future? Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 tips that we could give, and I'd say the first thing is that you've got to know or be knowledgeable about all of the equipment that you need when you're starting out. And it's very important, because if you're not using the right kind of equipment, then of course you're going to find challenges in getting the quality into your music. So when I talk about equipment, it's not like you need a lot of money in terms of investment of the equipment. It's just more about knowing where to go and what to place in your tracks. So if you're choosing from really great sounds, be it samples, sound banks, VST synths, then if the stuff you're using is great from the source, then you have to do less kind of messing around with the sound in order to get it sounding right and sounding good. So choosing really good sounds to begin with, or choosing from really good sound banks and packs and so on, that's what's going to make a big difference in your music. I'd say once you've chosen the right sound, you can live by very basic or simple rules when you come to what we call mixing those sounds together. And those basics can really just embody a really simple or seemingly simple areas that pretty much anyone could understand. We don't have to get too complicated with this. So if we place a sound in that sounds really good from its source, be it a kick drum, a bass, whatever it is, then all you have to do is address it in a very simplistic or seemingly simplistic way, which is just things like volume, just making sure that the volume is balanced and loud enough or quiet enough compared to the other instruments that you're trying to mix, and EQ. And EQ is just something where you can remove or emphasize a certain part of that sound. So it's not something that you need to study for. It's something that you can do through time and dedication, and that's really the next point. It's hard work. It's understanding that you're not going to make the next Beatport #1 on your first go. It's going to take time and it's going to take patience, but it's going to take hard work. Now, Lee and I, when we were doing our previous jobs, we would finish work at goodness knows what time, and you just switch on the computer at maybe 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and just get a couple of hours in just to try some stuff, just to try build a track. And even if you don't make it, it's not wasted, because you're learning in those small moments. And I think we live in a world now where we want everything and we want it all very quickly, but you need that hard work and you need to be patient to achieve your goals, and that's going to take time. So for me, it's those are 3 things that I could kind of say, is that if you understand those things, then you are going to get started and achieve your goals. We do a lot of tuition. We offer help where we can for producers of any level. So if it is something that anyone's ever interested in, you can obviously drop us a message on social media, or visit magsignaturesound.com, which is our website where we sell products and learning tools ourselves. But yeah, do send us a message, and those 3 things are certainly something that we can explain in more detail. But don't be put off by the technicality. Don't be put off by anything that anyone says. If you want to become a producer, then that's the first step. We can help guide you further there. But it takes a lot of hard work and dedication. But be patient. But don't let anything or anyone put you off. Get stuck into it. It's amazing once you start that journey. can you tell us about the show in Madrid for Stellar Sounds? Well, yeah, it's our first time playing in Madrid, so it's our debut there, and with Stellar Sounds too. It's something that we've heard a lot about from other producers, Sean Tyas, Ram, and our friends Yoshi and Razna, who obviously live in Madrid as well. It's certainly something that we've been anticipating for a while, so we're really excited. I mean, Madrid as a city, it's just exciting just to go there. You know, it's going to be a real privilege just to travel there and get to have a look around such an amazing city, and then to be playing there for Stellar Sounds as well is really the icing on the cake. So really excited to be making our debut there, and we will be looking to bring tracks from our label 140. We've got some really great new tracks that no one's heard. We'll be playing those. We've got, of course, our classic tracks and the bootlegs that we always put together for shows. And then, of course, as I mentioned, some tracks from the album. So we'll be looking to put together our usual melodic, energetic set. So really excited. So yeah, really a dream come true again, just to be playing in Madrid for Stellar Sounds. So yeah, really can't wait. Yeah, we hope to see a lot of people there and meet a lot of new people too. So yeah, really excited. How did you come up with the name Metta and Glide? Well, for myself, Adam, I really think that meta comes from two things for me. And the first thing is that the translation, the literal translation of the word metta, it comes from Buddhism, and it's a meditation focused on the development of unconditional love for all beings. So this is something that really spoke to me, personally speaking, in a very spiritual sense, because it's certainly a way that I try to live my life in certainly in that way of developing myself and connecting with people on a spiritual level. So it's certainly a really beautiful meaning for me, metta. And additionally, I think that it looks like a really cool word. It's sort of strange, but it almost looks like a trance or trancey word, if you like. So it's got a really great meaning, and it looks great for me. It looks perfect. It's a perfect fit for me. And for Lee, going under the alias Glide, I know it was something that he wanted to use for quite a long time, but never had the reason to use it until we formed ourselves as Metta and Glide. So for Lee, I think it just looks like a cool word and it sounds like a cool word. So when we were first making tracks together and we discussed what will we go by, what will we call ourselves, it was a very fluid conversation because we'd both had these aliases in the background for a little while, and I've just came up and just said, well, you know, I've always really liked metta, again the meaning and how the word looks, and Glide just said, well, I've always liked glide. That's something that I've been thinking about for a while because it just looks like a cool word. So that's how we formed the name for ourselves, Metta and Glide, and it's one of those that just rolls off the tongue, if you like. It's really effortless and it works together, and it just came about completely by chance that we both had these things both in the background ourselves. So in a way, it's kind of like meant to be, which is great. What can you tell us about your new album? Well, a new album is going to be 10 tracks and it will be released hopefully in the next couple of months. We're just finalizing a few last tracks, and then we'll be sent for mastering, where we'll bring the whole album together so it sounds as one. So it'll be amazing because when we're playing gigs at the moment, we're just playing kind of tracks from the album. And then, of course, when we hit the summer, we'll have all the tracks available and be looking to play them at all manner of gigs and festivals where we are. So, yeah, really excited because it's our Metta and Glide sound at its core, and a couple of left field tracks in there as well, just to keep people guessing and keeping things fresh. So The title of the album is going to be called The Journey, and it is basically representing a lot of what we've been talking about in this interview, is from where we've come from to where we are now. We've been a good 6-7 years at this now, from started from scratch and got to where we are now. And it is a journey, and it's not going to stop, because you never stop learning, you never stop evolving, or at least you shouldn't. So we every year that goes by, we're still trying to learn and stay true to ourselves, but also try to be different. So it's a real challenge, and it's a journey, and that's what the album's about. It's been a real journey from where we started to where we are now, from when we formed, when we discussed our names, Metta and Glyde, to the jobs we were doing at the time, to starting our website, Mag Signature Sound, to playing in Argentina, to producing these tracks. It's been a real journey, but it's been an amazing one, and it's one that we will continue. So hopefully you'll hear that in the album, because a lot of the tracks on this album are 1, 2, 3 years in the making. To be honest with you, they've been there. We've been sat on these really amazing tunes for a long time now, so it's going to be amazing when they're finally released and people can hear it and we can play them. So really excited. So hopefully the next couple of months, the Journey album will be ready and available for download.
Hi, this is Adam from Metta and Glyde, and we are on Palacio Buenos Aires radio show.
Quédate que ya regresamos con más Palacio Buenos Aires.
Estás en Tech FM. Estás en Tech FM. Estás en Tech FM.
Estás escuchando lo mejor de la cultura underground en materia de música electrónica.
You're listening Electrona Radio Station.
El lado under de la música electrónica.
Ariel Palacio te presenta la mayor plataforma de entrevistas de la escena electrónica global, Palacio Buenos Aires.
Escucha el mejor trance con Stelar Sounds en Palacio Buenos Aires.
La noche trance de Stelar Sounds.
Estás escuchando Láser Mix desde Trenquelauquen, provincia de Buenos Aires, República Argentina.
FM Trans, Buenos Aires. fmtrans.com.
Estás escuchando Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
Hi, this is Adam from Metta Glide, and we are on Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show.
¿Te gustaría escuchar la entrevista de Joris Boone, Marcus Schulz, Tempo Justo, Ana Tour, Tenisha? Solo poné en tu plataforma de podcast preferida PBA y el artista que más te guste. Escuchanos en Tech Radio, FM Trans 103.3 MHz, electronaradio.com, Lasermix FM 102.3, Trenkelauken, Dance.fm, Córdoba y Play Radio. Comunícate conmigo a través de linktr.ee/Ariel Palacio TV. Seguinos en Instagram, Palacio Buenos Aires.
You are listening to Palacio Buenos Aires Radio Show. Si hablamos de electrónica, hablamos de Palacio Buenos Aires.
Bueno amigos, así se va la edición 237 de PBA de Palacio Buenos Aires. Muchísimas gracias Stelar Sound. Muchas gracias Natalia. Y por supuesto, gracias a vos que estás del otro lado. Abrazo grande para la gente de Metta GLYDE. Acuérdense del evento el 15, sí, el sábado 15. Por primera vez tocan en Madrid junto a muchos amigos. Nos vemos y nos escuchamos la semana que viene. Los quiero mucho con todo el corazón. Chau, chau.
We know the longing we have to hold each other. I won't drown you in love, nor suffocate your needs. Now we're healed, we have our own language. I could skydive from the moon, sail an ocean on my fingertips when the wind screams my name. Take his hand, I'm free.
Escuchanos en Tech Radio, FM Trans 103.3 MHz, electronaradio.com, Lasermix FM 102.3, Trenquelauquen, Dance.fm, Córdoba y Play Radio.